Welcome to today's deep dive. Imagine spending 45 years of your life thinking you are just, fundamentally flawed.
Right, just completely broken.
Exactly. Like you believe you're lazy or broken or you're just not trying hard enough to keep up with everyone else.
Mm.
And then right in the middle of perimenopause, when you think you are literally losing your mind, you find out you've actually been walking around with completely unmedicated ADHD or autism your entire life.
Which is just, it's a staggering realization.
It really is. And this isn't some rare glitch in the medical system. It is happening to nearly half of all neurodivergent women. So today we are diving into the incredibly chaotic intersection of midlife hormonal changes and neurodevelopmental conditions.
It's a huge topic.
Yeah, and we've got a fantastic stack of sources for this. We're pulling from medical journals, psychiatric research from experts like Dr. Ryan Sultan and Dr. Jolene Brighton, UK conference notes, some really fascinating validated screening tools, and firsthand accounts from autistic women.
The first-hand accounts really bring the data to life, I think.
They absolutely do. And our mission for this deep dive is highly specific. We are investigating whether the use of systemic hormone replacement therapy, or HRT, actually masks or alters the diagnostic criteria when evaluating an adult woman for ADHD or autism during midlife.
It's the ultimate diagnostic mystery, really, because for a long time, the medical community just looked at midlife cognitive crashes as, a standard rite of passage.
Right, just part of getting older.
Exactly. But now we're finally looking at the collision of endocrinology and neurodiversity. And what we're finding completely rewrites the playbook on women's mental health.
So to understand why this collision is so explosive, we really have to look closely at the biology first. Like, we can't even touch the HRT question until we figure out what hormones are actually doing in a neurodivergent brain.
Because estrogen is wildly misunderstood.
Oh, completely. We are taught in health class that it's just a reproductive hormone.
Yeah.
It gives you hips, it runs your menstrual cycle, and that's pretty much the end of the story.
Which is a massive oversimplification.
Sure.
Yeah, estrogen, and specifically estradiol, which is its most potent form, is a neuroactive hormone.
Meaning it acts directly on the brain.
Exactly. It's deeply embedded in the brain's executive function center, the prefrontal cortex. So think of estradiol as a master dopamine modulator.
Right, really?
Yeah, it doesn't just float around in the background. It actively changes the architecture of how your brain processes reward and focus.
Hold on. I thought dopamine was purely a brain chemical about, reward and attention. Are you saying my ovaries are basically dictating my brain's executive function?
To a really significant degree, yes.
That is wild.
It is. Estradiol actually upregulates the synthesis of dopamine. It literally tells the enzymes in your brain to manufacture more of it.
Oh, wow.
And beyond that, it physically alters the density and sensitivity of your dopamine receptors, so it makes them better at catching the signals.
Okay, so it makes more dopamine and makes the brain better at using it.
Exactly. And it acts as a shield, too. It slows down the enzymes that clear dopamine out of the synapses, so it actively works to keep dopamine lingering in the brain longer.
Okay, let's unpack this. If you are a woman with ADHD, your brain fundamentally struggles with dopamine regulation.
There's a built-in deficit.
Right, a constitutive deficit. You don't make enough or you clear it out way too fast. So from puberty onward, the estrogen your body naturally produces is acting as this lifelong hidden hormonal scaffolding.
Yes.
It's basically propping up a struggling dopamine system.
And that scaffolding allows so many neurodivergent women to compensate. They white-knuckle their way through life, masking their symptoms.
And often functioning at a really high level.
Incredibly high.
Yeah.
Because the estrogen is quietly spotting them the dopamine they lack.
Okay, let's use an analogy here to kind of see the mechanics of this. Imagine a busy, incredibly chaotic restaurant.
I love this analogy.
Right, so the restaurant is the ADHD brain. The kitchen staff, those are the dopamine pathways. And they are completely disorganized.
They're losing tickets, cooking the wrong order.
They're totally distracted, exactly.
Yeah.
But the restaurant has an incredibly capable floor manager. That manager is estrogen. So as long as estrogen is walking the floor, putting out fires, keeping the staff moving, the restaurant functions, the customers get their food. But then perimenopause hits.
The manager starts calling out sick.
Yeah.
And then eventually she just quits entirely.
The manager completely vanishes. And without that manager, the underlying pre-existing chaos of the kitchen is completely exposed.
The whole system just grinds to a halt.
The thickets pile up.
And the clinical data on the structural collapse is staggering. A recent European population study looked at this exact demographic.
What did they find?
They found that 54.2% of women with ADHD report experiencing severe, debilitating perimenopausal symptoms.
Well, over 50%.
Yeah. Now, compare that to neurotypical women where it's only about one-third.
That's a massive difference.
It is. But the most alarming part of that data is the timeline. For the ADHD population, that severe symptom burden peaks up to a full decade earlier.
A decade. We need to pause and emphasize what a decade earlier actually means for someone's life.
Yeah, let's break that down.
If the average age of menopause is around 51, a decade earlier means these women are hitting severe cognitive and emotional burnout in their late 30s or early 40s.
Precisely. They are hitting this wall at the exact moment when the societal demands on them are often at their absolute peak.
Right, career responsibilities are maximizing.
Maybe they're raising young children, managing a household, and suddenly the internal scaffolding they didn't even know they relied on just evaporates.
And this leads to this massive wave of midlife diagnoses. I mean, 43% of women get their first ADHD diagnosis between the ages of 41 and 50.
Yeah.
But we have to be incredibly clear about the mechanism here. You don't just, catch ADHD at 45.
No, not at all. What's fascinating here is that ADHD is a lifelong neurodevelopmental condition. This isn't late onset ADHD, it's late diagnosed. Right. And it brings up a crucial question. Why were these women missed in childhood?
Because the criteria were different.
Exactly. In the 80s and 90s, the diagnostic criteria were largely based on how ADHD presented in young boys. You know, hyperactivity, physical restlessness, disrupting the classroom.
And young girls didn't fit that mold.
Often they didn't. Young girls often presented with inattentive ADHD. They were staring out the window, quietly daydreaming, or they were masking their internal chaos by being intense people pleasers and perfectionists.
So because they weren't causing a problem for the teacher, they just flew under the radar.
Exactly.
And then puberty hit, the estrogen flooded in, and it essentially hid the deficit for the next 30 years.
Yep.
Which brings us to the absolute nightmare that is navigating the medical system during midlife. Because this hormonal collapse creates profound confusion for the clinician, we are looking at a serious diagnostic dilemma.
The symptom overlap is incredibly dense. I mean, when a woman enters perimenopause, erratic estrogen levels trigger severe brain fog, memory issues, emotional dysregulation, and just a general crushing sense of feeling overwhelmed.
Which sounds exactly like untreated ADHD.
Exactly like it. And the physical symptoms make the cognitive ones so much worse.
They really do compound each other.
Take hot flashes, for example. Vasomotor symptoms aren't just uncomfortable, they violently disrupt sleep architecture.
Oh, the night sweats.
Right. You wake up drenched in sweat multiple times a night, meaning you never get deep, restorative REM sleep.
And chronic sleep deprivation utterly destroys executive function, even in a neurotypical brain.
Completely. Now add that to a brain that already has a neurodevelopmental difference.
It's a disaster. And you see that exact same structural collapse in autistic women, but it takes a slightly different shape. It manifests as a profound state of autistic burnout.
Yes, the burnout is intense.
I was looking at one of the firsthand accounts from an autistic woman who described this transition, and she said, I spent 40 years building a perfect mask to survive at work, and when the night sweat started, it felt like my mask literally melted off my face.
Oh, wow. That is incredibly powerful.
It really puts the loss of bandwidth into perspective, doesn't it?
It does, because it becomes a physical impossibility to maintain the mask. Autistic individuals expend massive amounts of energy consciously navigating a neurotypical world.
Right, reading social cues, managing sensory input.
Exactly. And when perimenopause disrupts the brain's energy reserves and the estrogen drop physically heightens sensory sensitivities to sound, light, touch, the bandwidth to mask just disappears.
But this leads to a really dangerous trap. These women go to their doctors completely burned out, desperate for help, and they are systematically dismissed.
It happens all the time.
They get handed a prescription for an SSRI, given a label of anxiety or depression, or they're just told it's a standard quote-unquote midlife crisis.
And while depression and anxiety can certainly co-occur, treating just the mood without recognizing the underlying neurodevelopmental difference is it's like putting a bucket under a leaky roof without ever looking at the hole.
Yeah.
The root cause, the untreated neurodivergence combined with the hormonal withdrawal, is completely ignored.
Okay, wait, isn't everyone forgetful and stressed in perimenopause? I mean, how can a clinician possibly know if a woman is actually ADHD or autistic and not just suffering from standard menopause brain?
This raises an important question. Clinically, the only way to tell the difference is to look backward.
Backward.
Yes. We rely heavily on longitudinal history. True ADHD or autism leaves a trail of breadcrumbs all the way back to childhood. Even if the person was high achieving, even if the symptoms were heavily masked, there will be evidence.
Like what kind of evidence?
Things like a history of being labeled smart but disorganized on report cards, or intense cyclical hyperfixations.
Oh, right.
Sensory issues with clothing tags or food textures as a kid, or simply an internal lifelong experience of having to exert 10 times more effort than peers just to complete standard tasks.
And menopause brain is different.
Right. Menopause brain, on the other hand, has a discrete, sudden onset. If a woman had flawlessly functioning executive control her entire life with zero internal friction, and suddenly at 45 she is drowning in brain fog, that is likely purely hormonal.
That makes perfect sense. If the friction was always there and she was just white-knuckling her way through it until her hormones dropped, that's unmasking.
Exactly.
So this brings us to the absolute core focus of our deep dive. If menopause creates a brain fog that perfectly mimics or severely worsens ADHD and autism, what happens when we introduce systemic hormone replacement therapy?
The big question.
Right, if a woman starts taking estrogen, does fixing the hormones hide the neurodivergence from the clinician?
The clinical consensus on this is incredibly reassuring. HRT does not mask the diagnostic criteria. It actually clarifies them.
Wait, let me make sure I'm deducing this correctly. If HRT is just replacing the lost estrogen, it's essentially just putting our restaurant manager back on the floor.
Exactly.
It's not rewriting the menu or retraining the chaotic kitchen staff. It's just resetting the woman back to her 35-year-old baseline.
That is exactly the mechanism. We have to look at what systemic HRT, particularly transdermal estradiol, is proven to treat.
Okay.
It is highly effective for vasomotor symptoms, eliminating the hot flashes and night sweats. And because it stops the night sweats, it profoundly resolves sleep fragmentation.
Which gives the brain a chance to rest.
Yes, and it has demonstrated powerful effects in stabilizing perimenopausal mood disorders.
But it doesn't cure the ADHD. It doesn't fix the fundamental dopamine deficit.
It does not. HRT is not a substitute for psychiatric pharmacotherapy. There is no large randomized trial showing that HRT specifically treats core ADHD or autism symptoms.
So what does it actually do for the diagnosis?
What HRT does is clear the physiological debris. If a woman has only hormonal brain fog, HRT usually resolves it entirely and she goes back to normal.
But if she doesn't?
But if she has pre-existing underlying ADHD or autism, HRT clears away the sleep deprivation and the acute mood swings, leaving the neurodevelopmental baseline exposed.
So it makes the clinician's job easier, not harder.
Much easier.
It removes the confounding variables so a proper evaluation can actually happen.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If I go on HRT and finally start sleeping again, will I score lower on an ADHD or autism assessment? Will I accidentally cure myself out of getting a proper diagnosis?
And that fear of accidentally curing yourself is so common, but it's completely unfounded. You cannot cure a brain-based neurodevelopmental condition with an estrogen patch.
Right.
It might give you the physical energy to cope a little better, but it will not rewire your prefrontal cortex.
It's like trying to tune a piano during a hurricane.
Oh, I love that imagery. Let's break that down.
Diagnosing midlife ADHD without addressing the hormonal chaos is pointless because all you hear is the wind and the rain.
Mm-hmm.
HRT doesn't change the piano. It doesn't tighten the internal strings or fix the mechanism of the keys. It just clears the hurricane.
Right.
It stops the storm so the clinician can actually sit down, hit the keys, and hear exactly which strings are out of tune.
That is a perfect way to look at it.
Yeah.
And there's a fascinating layer to this, too. For women who do receive an ADHD diagnosis and decide to pursue medication, the clinical literature suggests that HRT and ADHD stimulants don't just coexist, they actually work synergistically.
Wait, they help each other.
They rely on each other. Think back to the biology we discussed. Estrogen makes dopamine receptors more sensitive and helps manufacture dopamine.
Right, the master modulator.
Exactly. And stimulant medications work by keeping existing dopamine in the brain's synapses longer. But if your estrogen levels are flatlined, your brain isn't making enough dopamine to begin with.
So the stimulant medication shows up to do its job, but there's no dopamine there to work with.
Exactly. The medication has a much harder time working. Restoring the estrogen with HRT physically rebuilds the hormonal substrate that the stimulant medication acts upon,
Making the ADHD treatment significantly more effective.
Yes.
It's all incredibly connected.
Yeah.
So knowing that HRT acts as an ally to diagnosis rather than a blinder How does a woman actually navigate getting evaluated during this chaotic window?
Hmm.
You mentioned there are specific tools and pathways in the sources.
Yeah, the validated screening tools are the best place to start. For ADHD, the standard is the ASRS V1.1,
Which stands for?
the Adult ADHD Self-Report Scale. It's an 18-question screener that is highly sensitive to adult presentations. It asks questions that get past the childhood stereotypes.
Give us an example of the kind of question it asks.
So instead of asking, "Are you hyperactive?" it asks things like, "How often do you have difficulty wrapping up the final details of a project once the challenging parts have been done?"
Oh, that perfectly captures the executive dysfunction of adult ADHD.
Right, it's so specific.
And what about for autism? How do you screen for a lifetime of masking?
For that, the RATE-SR is heavily utilized.
The A does.
Right, the RIFO Autism Asperger Diagnostic Scale revised. It is an 80-question screener that goes incredibly deep into lifelong behaviors and sensory motor differences.
So it's not just like surface level stuff.
No, it doesn't just ask if you like routines. It asks questions like, do you mimic the social behaviors of people on television just to know how to act in social situations?
Wow.
Yeah, it targets the internal experience of masking.
But we need to decode the clinical reality here. A screener is not a diagnosis, right?
A vital distinction. Screeners like the ASRS or the AA-DESR are compasses. They tell you which direction to walk. But they cannot replace a formal clinical evaluation.
What does a formal one look like?
Well, for autism, a formal diagnosis often involves tools like the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule.
Okay.
The ADOS relies on direct clinical observation, interactive modules, and a deep, structured dive into your early developmental history. You simply cannot diagnose yourself definitively with an online quiz, no matter how validated the quiz is.
It's a tool to gather data, so you can advocate for yourself with a specialist.
Exactly.
And speaking of advocating for yourself, there is a massive point in the research about medication management for women who are already diagnosed.
Oh, the transition-aware management.
Yes. Say you're an ADHD woman in your 30s, you've been on a stable dose of stimulants for years, and it works perfectly. Then you hit perimenopause, and suddenly your medication feels like sugar pills.
Patients panic when this happens. I mean, they instantly assume they've built up a tolerance to their medication and that nothing is going to work for them anymore.
But it's not tolerance. The sources call for transition-aware medication management.
Right.
Because the falling estradiol physically changes the brain environment. The dosage of your ADHD medication often needs an upward titration during perimenopause.
You physically require a higher dose.
Exactly, to achieve the exact same executive function, because the invisible hormonal assist you used to get from your natural estrogen is just gone.
Or you might need a complete change in formulation. Sometimes a patient needs to switch to a longer-acting formulation or add a small afternoon booster dose.
Just to get through the day.
Yeah, simply because their sleep architecture is so compromised that a standard 8-hour medication isn't enough to get them through a demanding day.
It really highlights the absolute necessity of co-management.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the psychiatric management of your neurodivergence and the gynecologic management of your menopause cannot exist in silos.
Have to work together.
They must. Your psychiatrist shouldn't be withholding ADHD meds, assuming HRT will fix your brain, and your gynecologist shouldn't ignore your cognitive struggles, assuming it's just menopause.
You need a care team that is communicating, or at the very least, you as the patient need to be armed with this mechanical understanding to bridge that gap yourself.
Absolutely.
So let's distill all this down. What are the core truths to walk away with? Number one, the midlife drop in estrogen removes the essential dopamine scaffolding for neurodivergent women, triggering a second wave unmasking of ADHD or autism.
Right.
Number two, systemic HRT is a critical, highly effective tool for stabilizing the physical chaos of menopause, like sleep fragmentation and hot flashes.
Right.
And number three, our central mission. HRT does not cure, hide, or mask ADHD or autism. It clears the hurricane. It separates the signal from the noise, so your true neurodivergent baseline can be accurately recognized and properly treated.
It is about removing the physiological barriers to clear the path for psychological support.
And I want to remind you of a profound insight from Dr. Jolene Brighton's work on this topic. If you are in the thick of this transition right now, feeling like you are failing at things you used to handle with ease, your symptoms are data, not character flaws.
That is so important to hear.
You are not lazy, you are not crazy, and you are not broken. Your brain is simply operating in a drastically altered chemical environment.
Reframing that narrative is vital. The sheer amount of self-blame that women in this demographic carry is heartbreaking.
It really is.
And neurologically speaking, it is entirely misplaced.
It truly is. And to wrap up our deep dive today, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, something that reframes this entire terrifying midlife experience.
Okay.
We know from extensive clinical literature that untreated ADHD and heavily masked autism have a massive cumulative cost on a person's life expectancy.
They do.
Untreated neurodivergence impacts cardiovascular health due to chronic cortisol spikes. It increases addiction risks, accident rates, and causes severe systemic physical stress.
The physical toll of forcing a neurodivergent brain to operate in a neurotypical world for 40 years without support is immense. It damages the body.
So keeping that reality in mind, while the chaos of perimenopause feels like a total breakdown, a complete and terrifying collapse of your functioning, what if this hormonal crash is actually a profound biological failsafe?
Oh, wow. That is a completely different way of looking at it.
Think about the timeline. You spend 40 years masking, white-knuckling your way through life, quietly damaging your long-term health, and your body finally reaches a point where it says, no more.
It just stops.
What if the unmasking of midlife, the fact that you literally lose the biological capacity to overcompensate anymore, is exactly what forces a woman to finally seek out and receive the neurodivergent care she has needed her entire life?
That's incredible.
What if the breakdown of perimenopause is the exact catalyst that ultimately extends and saves her life?
It forces the invisible friction to become visible. It forces the medical system and the woman herself to finally address the root cause instead of just treating the symptoms.
The diagnostic waters might be murky, and the traditional X-ray machine might be useless when it comes to the neurodivergent brain. But once the hurricane of perimenopause clears, what is left behind isn't a broken system. It's just a different kind of brain, finally stepping out of the fog and demanding the exact care it deserves. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.